of 1500 West Highland Street, lot number 104 in Kings Manor Mobile Home Park, Lakeland, Florida, 33801. Wynn's phone number is 813-687-7129. The recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw of the Oldsmobile History Center at Wynn's home on January 8th, 1989. This is tape number 1 of 1 tape.
This is Win Ueberroth, and I live in 1500 West Highland Street, Lakeland, Florida.
You have a
Zip code?
Yeah, zip code.
Zip code 33801.
Do you have a apartment number, or
lot 104.
Do you need that to get it here?
In the mobile home, yeah.
Okay.
Mobile home court, Kings Manor. But
all right.
You don't need that.
All right. What's your phone number?
Phone number is 813-687-7129.
All right. Now, if you would just take us back to when you started at Oldsmobile. When was that, and what were you doing?
I hired in November of 1950.
Okay.
And prior to that time, I was new car conditioning at Chevrolet dealership in Alma, Michigan.
Oh, okay. So you came from there to Oldsmobile?
I came from there to Olds, yeah.
Okay. What did you hire in doing, Win?
I hired in the motor plant, and the rocket engine plant, and the headline.
Working on production?
Working on production.
Okay. What were you doing?
I run the mill, mill.
The bank face mill?
No, the intake. Intake mill.
face.
Yeah,
okay.
Intake face.
All right.
Funny thing happened when I hired in, because I didn't know anything about Lansing or anything about Olds, really. And so a bunch of us guys were in there, and this guy said to me, he says, would you like to work in a forge plant? And I didn't even hear well then, and I said, no. I said, I'd just as soon work for General Motors if it's all right with you.
Not recognizing that the forge plant was?
No, I didn't know.
Yeah.
There might have been a Ford plant in Lansing for all I knew.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. But at any rate, I hired in with a couple of guys that were with me all my career.
All right.
Or they worked at Olds as long as I did. And
who were they?
There,
okay.
I forget the name.
That's all right.
But at any rate.
Do you remember who your boss was?
No. I don't. Who was the superintendent then of the motor plant?
It was Louis Church?
Louis Church was superintendent. Maybe. Okay, now my boss was his son-in-law or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Now, who could that be?
I don't know.
You don't know?
That's okay.
But he was some relation to Louis Church.
Did you run all the machinery in the department, Win, or
eventually I did. Eventually I became setup man in the head department.
Okay.
And
where was that department located when you
38.
38.
Right, well, about where the old head floor is now. That was brand new then.
Yeah.
It was right in front of the.
Just across the aisle, kind of from the assembly line?
From the assembly line, yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. Was it just one line of machines, or was there a double line in there?
No, we had double line even then. Yeah, two broaches. And,
okay. Did they run? Did they run parallel to each other? Or do you remember how they went? Or were they starting at two different ends and coming to the middle, or something?
No, they started at one end. They ran parallel and intermixed.
Okay.
I think maybe like there's 120 and 230, something like that,
Yeah.
Some of the bottleneck stuff was two. And of course I got loaned out and laid off a lot that.
Really?
Early part, yeah. Every summer you get laid off for 3 months.
Because they were shut down, or because low sales?
Because of shut down, changeovers and stuff, And,
okay.
I got loaned out a lot to the head floor, or the head assembly area, which is about in the same place it is now.
Okay.
And except it was all by hand, and there's no machinery,
They put all of the valves and the springs and everything in all by hand.
Yep, and I remember you, Jim, particularly taking time study on putting the valves in.
Yeah.
And I said they could put in at so many rate. And he said, that's got to be the world's fastest job. And I said, no, Jim, I put them in by hand at that rate, putting here, by hand, not with machine.
Yeah.
So it can be done, but whatever.
Were you there when the new head machine came in, Win? Or had you left that by then?
Oh, I had left that.
How long did you stay down there on the head floor then?
Not too long.
Okay.
Not too long. I went in skilled trades in 52.
Okay.
So I really didn't,
Machine repair kind of stuff?
No, it was fixture repair.
Fixture repair. Okay.
And I worked a lot of different areas there. And after the jet plant went out, they quit building jets.
Okay.
Engines, why, then I went back to production.
Now, were you working on the jet engine program?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, at Plant 3?
At Plant 3, yeah.
Okay. What do you remember about that thing? What was where and what were we doing over there?
Well, I worked in the compressor disc area.
All right.
Thin disc. And
there was a fat disc, too?
yeah, there was a,
What did they call
I don't know,
it?
one was a compression and one was a
The turbine, maybe.
turbine disc, yeah.
Okay.
Turbines were the fat ones.
Okay.
And, but anyway, Jack Flanders and Bill Meade were both setup men in the department that I worked in. So
Okay.
that was the fixture repairman, and that's how I come to happen to know them. And yeah, had a lot of southern people up there.
Why was that, I wonder?
Well, because of new hires, they
Yeah.
needed a lot more hires than they could get. And I remember this one guy, he was right from the coal mine.
No kidding.
And he had trouble keeping his tooling. At that time, you had to sharpen your own tools.
Oh.
And he couldn't sharpen a tool for nothing. So he'd always give me a whole bunch of his tools first thing in the morning. Sharpen these bits up for me, will you? And I said, we're not drilling for coal. But he was quite a guy. And but he couldn't sharpen his tool.
Did you move over there right when the place started?
Yeah, in fact, I was there before any of the machinery. I helped set up some of the,
The new
there wasn't hardly any machinery in there when we went over.
Big empty place.
Yeah.
Was the bumper plant there then, or not?
No, that was all,
That was later.
yeah, even after, that was still jet engine back there.
In the north part was all jet
Yeah.
engine still.
And
Okay.
then they made the aluminum head there after
Yeah.
that went out.
Yeah.
And then it went into the bumper plant.
Okay.
And I worked in the bumper plant there.
Did you?
Not on production, but I was, when I was in time study, I worked there.
All right. We'll get to that in a minute.
Well, at any rate, I worked in skilled trades for 9 or 10 years, maybe 10 years.
Most of the time at Plant 3?
Most of the time, no.
Okay.
This was, no, because again, I was right on the borderline of staying every year or getting kicked back after changeover,
Yeah.
And a lot of years I'd get kicked back for a couple of months, so then I'd go out and figure out which place was working the most overtime and get in that. I worked in the axle plant, and the old axle plant, and the plating plant.
Still fixture
And the
repair?
old one, no, in production.
Production
When
now.
I go back, and then the press room. And I think I went back to the press room most because they were working most overtime. And I could get the
Down in
shutdown job. the easy
52 or
job.
56 down in
And
there?
what was it? 50? No, the small press room was
Oh,
what
34.
number? 34.
Next
yeah.
door to 40.
Yes.
Okay. What were you running there? Do you remember?
Automatic presses mostly.
The little inclinable things?
Yeah.
You kept your fingers out of that?
I tried to. I was working there one day, and the guy, there's 2 automatics right side by side, and working automatic, you just sat back there and watch it run,
Right.
And this guy next to me, why, all of a sudden he jumped off a chair, like that,
Held his chest, huh?
and couldn't figure out. I heard a bang, but I didn't know what the hell happened,
Yeah.
So I stopped my press, and I got out, and what happened? He said, I don't know. He said, just like a bee stung me. And so I said, well, let's see. And he took off his shirt and couldn't see anything there. Just a little red spot.
Yeah.
And I said, well, some went on. What do you remember? You know, you sat there about half asleep.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I remember I was watching this dowel pin come down and down. And then next thing, why, this beast on me or whatever it was. Well, what had actually happened was this dowel pin came out. And got caught between the die and part of it went in his chest.
It squirted out. Huh?
Yeah. And he still had the hunk in there. They never did take it out.
They didn't take it out? And he didn't bleed?
No.
Isn't that something? Huh.
Not very much.
Isn't that
I had another experience with a dowel pin when I was on fixture repair. I was pounding one in, and unfortunately or stupidly, I was using a steel hammer.
Uh-huh.
And part of the pin broke off. And it went in my,
right in your wrist.
In my vein there, you know, the big one. Blood just spurted out.
Oh, boy, I bet it did.
So you could tell you'd stop it with your thumb, you know.
Yeah.
And Dick Serrato was a production foreman.
Yeah, I remember him.
And he was just scared to death of blood. You know, he was bragging about how tough he was and all this kind of stuff, but he was scared to death of blood. And so we were talking with Flanders and Bill Meade were in on that one. But I'm going to get old Serrato.
Oh, no.
He was sitting in his office, you know, and I went in, I had my thumb over it. And I says, hey, Dick, give me a pass first aid. Yeah, you don't need a pass first aid. And I took my thumb up, and that blood just spurted up, and Dick passed right out.
He did it.
Did a fadeaway right then.
Well, that's all right. You got it.
Yeah.
So you bounced around from plant to plant then.
Yep. And then
But when back to the axle plant, what was going on out there?
well, I didn't. It wasn't out there. The actual plant was in
21.
Yeah, in 21.
What
underneath.
What was going on in 21? What were they doing out there? Do you remember?
I know. I assembled them and.
The rear axles? You were working on the rear axle?
Mm-hmm.
On the little assembly line?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they made them over there. Before I went to Plant 3, it was made there.
Yes.
And
what were you doing there?
about every job in that place, too. I run the lathe and run the, what the hell did you call that? That cuts a thing in it. Cuts the
spline?
Spline.
Uh-huh. So you were working on axle shafts?
On axle shaft, yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And at any rate, I did pretty near everything in that department, too. And then, because of getting kicked back all the time, you didn't necessarily go back to the same place you were at, you know, for fixture repair. So I worked pretty near every place in fixture repair there in the whole plant, too. Plant 3, across the street in the differential, a lot of places. But I never worked at final assembly. I was never up on final assembly, nor did I ever work there. Anything. And then I liked fixture repair. I enjoyed the work and everything. Doing good, you know. And then my wife got sick. And I needed a person to, I was working the afternoon shift and split shift. And on nights I just didn't have anybody to stay with her. So I went and found personnel and told him I needed a job. And he said, well, do you ever consider salary? I said, well, not really. I'm satisfied with where I'm working. What do you have to do? So they said, well, you have to take a test first. So I took the test. Then he said, well, where do you want to work? Well, now this is all right after, like the same minute. And I said, I don't know. I said, I do know a couple of guys up in time study, Jack Flanders and Bill Meade had gone up there then. And I said, I know a couple of guys up there, and if they can do her, I can do her, So I said, okay. So then a couple of weeks later, they called me up, and that's how I ended up in
when was
time
that?
study.
When? About?
Yeah, let's see, 52, 10, 62, 63, either 63 or 64.
Okay, all right.
And that's where I ended up.
See, now, do you remember who the boss was there then?
Boss there then was, before Shafee, I forget his name.
Fred Lim?
Fred Lems was the boss, but he is just getting ready to retire when I
All right, when you
went in
started.
there, so he, maybe 2 or 3 weeks and he retired.
Okay. And then Chafee was
And
there.
then Shafee was the boss. And Ringenberg was the boss.
Followed, yeah.
And Ewer.
Well, no, Kerr.
Kerr, yeah.
Kerr,
I forgot about her.
yeah.
Larry and
Maybe Leonard. I don't know whether Leonard preceded
Jim
me or
Leonard,
followed me, but anyway,
that's how I think he proceeded.
I think he preceded it. Yeah. Okay. Well, what'd you do in time study?
Well, there, it was probably just about like production. I did a lot of things. I pretty near worked every plant as
Did
time
you?
study.
What kinds of things did you do?
Well, we took type studies, of course,
Yeah.
and set the standards. And,
Which is what?
Which is what?
Yeah, what is a standard?
The pieces per hour that you got to get in order to meet production standards.
Okay.
That's basically, in a nutshell, what it's all about.
You used a stopwatch?
We did at that time, yeah.
Okay.
And
Did people look forward to seeing you out on the floor?
definitely not. No.
They did not.
No, but you know, even all of that, I don't think I developed too many enemies there because everybody felt it was a necessary thing, you know. And a lot of people would have rather worked under a standard than they would a fair day's work or whatever you want to call it, you know. That way, if they decided to hurry up, they could earn some free time for themselves or whatever. But it was a thankless job as far as glory and all that kind of stuff. But at that time, they felt it was a necessary job too, you know.
You spent most of the time out in the shop?
Most of the time, yep. And I said I worked the forge plant
Okay.
and plant 3, of course, and the main plant. I never worked final assembly there as time study.
Okay.
And I was also, after I got supervisor, I then a supervisor for all 3 plants too, as a matter of fact. At one time or another I did.
What was going on over at the forge plant when you were over there? Do you remember?
It was differential when I was there.
There was differential plant.
The forge plant was still there, you know. They
Little
were
bit
still
of it.
making rods. And,
Okay.
Some outside crankshafts. They were in old crankshafts. They're mostly, I don't know, Chrysler, I think.
Somebody else,
Yeah.
anyway. We weren't making our forged crank
No,
rolls yet.
no.
Okay.
And
The steel building come in while you were over there or not? Or
the
was that-
differential part of it.
No, the steel casting building. Scrap utilization or what?
Oh, that was there. Yeah.
Was that there?
Yeah. They, whatever it was a big bummer as far as I was concerned, but it was there.
Yeah, okay.
It was there.
Did you get out into that building at all? Did we have to do?
No, we didn't do time studies in there.
Okay.
I just went out there because guy asked me to look things over and see what I thought about laying out this, using that, and using the other thing, you know.
Yeah.
I forget who the boss was now. It was,
Howard Rohrback.
yeah, Uncle Howdy. Yep.
And Ralph McNitt was the
Ralph McNitt. Yeah, he
engineer.
was a guy, yeah.
Yeah, the engineer on the thing.
Yeah.
Okay, what did the time study guys have kind of a schedule of things they had to do during a year?
Oh, yes, they did. Mostly
Back at the ranch.
back there once. No, you had, I suppose, an area to cover. You know, maybe you and a couple other guys covered the area. So you knew you had to get the estimates first, or the new jobs.
Okay.
Is
New
what you
parts,
did. New parts, and new
change.
procedures, and
Okay.
things of that nature. got that first if you could. A lot of them, for instance, in a press room, they come in with a new part, heater hole cover. You know, how many heater hole covers are you going to get? So that type of thing, you didn't get, you know, I went maybe a whole year on estimate yet.
Yeah.
So maybe 2 years or whatever, but you got the estimated jobs first.
Now those would occur at a certain time during the year usually?
Right after changeover.
Okay.
After startup.
Yeah. All right. So then you would be very heavy in the plant at that period of time?
Yeah, prior to changeover, of course, we made up the group routings and things, you know, did the budgets and things like that.
Okay.
You know. That was between the, probably started when the budget started in November, September, or I don't know, maybe October. Ran through January.
Okay.
Whenever it was finalized or whatever. But.
And did the time study fellows get to participate in other kinds, like during model change? Did they get out to help with model change, or did they get to participate in other kinds of things other than work standards things?
Oh yeah, well, like I said, there was inventory. They were always worked inventory.
Okay.
Some kind of some capacity, you know.
Go out and counting things.
No, not actually counting, just supervising, taking the tickets and making sure they were right and things like that.
Okay. That was a once-a-year occurrence too?
Yep.
Okay.
I remember one year I was working inventory, and they had this guy that couldn't write.
Oh gosh.
And he couldn't figure mathematically, but he could add up X's and crosses and all that kind of stuff, you know.
Okay.
So anyway, I don't know who's responsible, and I guess it doesn't make any difference, but they had him counting bearing shells.
Oh no.
And here we are, we got probably 20 different kinds of shells, 20 sizes, and millions of them, okay? So he's out there busier than a beaver, and I'm a checker, and I was going along seeing everybody was busy and doing the right thing and all that kind of stuff, you know. So I walked over by him, and he had about 40 sheets of paper and nothing but checks on them. I said, "What in the hell are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm counting the bearing shells. Different sizes. Here's the browns, here's the yellows, and here's the whites, and here, whatever." And I said, "Well, I know, but what's all this scratching on you?" And he said, "Well, if I tell you, you'll let me go." He says, I can't figure, I can't write." I said, "Well, it doesn't make any difference to me, I guess, as long as you have good figures." But he says, "I can add tens." And so on the back side of the paper, he had all these tens added up, and he had something like, up in the hundreds of thousands, just by check marks. Can you imagine that?
Isn't that something? Just using...
Yep.
Wow.
And he would have been ideal, you know, for a place like maybe the blocks or something,
where there was
you
a
didn't have
fair
too many,
few.
and X's and checks would have been, you know, all right.
Oh, my Lord.
But for bearing shells, and he couldn't, and there were, say, 24 or 36 in the box, I don't know. But he couldn't add the 36 or 24 together, so he had to take 10 of them, you know.
Yeah.
He could only do by tens. That was all he could do. But he was a good worker. He was a hard worker. He put a lot of time in it, and they were probably right.
Yeah.
Probably right.
Probably conscientious.
Yep.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? No? What was going on over at, let's say, Plant 3 after the jet engine?
After the jet, the crankshaft moved over there.
Okay.
I worked in the crankshaft when I was crossing the assembly line. Which building would that be? The engine assembly line.
Oh, okay, over in 33,
Yeah,
probably.
okay.
That was very early on.
Yep.
Okay.
And I was drilling oil holes then.
All right.
And we had to sharpen our own drills then.
Uh-huh.
Because I was in fixture repair and knew a little bit about that kind of stuff, guy come over there and give me all the damn drills to sharpen.
Mm.
I did it. They do my work for me, and I sharpen their drills for them. You know, it was a trade-off.
Sure.
And
At some point in time, then that moved out of there and went to
it
plant
went
3.
to plant 3. Yeah.
Must have been right after the jet engine left, huh?
It was shortly after. I think that was about the first thing that moved over there.
Uh-huh.
And then there was what else was over there?
The plating plant must have went in there someplace.
I don't know when that went in.
Okay.
I really
You
don't.
didn't deal much with
I
that.
worked in the front end mostly.
Okay. Okay.
I was supervisor in time study. I had the plating, but I never. I was never back in there very much to know when it went in or what they did. All I know is one day we had. They weren't getting the bumpers out. So John Macreese and I went down there and we stayed around, hung around for quite a while to see what was going on. And I said, some of these damn bumpers are coming back, John.
Going through twice.
I want you to put a file mark on them. And every time they come around, you put another file mark on them. So we had bumpers that were going around the whole process as much as 12 times.
Oh my goodness.
Yep, and you couldn't hardly lift them. You couldn't lift them.
That
Damn
must have
things
had a
off the
1/4 inch
rack.
of plate on them.
There was. It was loaded. I'd like to gotten one of them bumpers on my car. And so we put a stop to that. But there's...
was that because people didn't know what they were doing? Or what
no,
was causing
no. There's hanky-panky back there.
Yeah.
That's neither here nor there.
Right.
They cut deals and whatever. But in the, nothing exciting happened that I know of back in Buckford. When I was fixture repair on the, front cover, which was right by our fixture repair office in 33. Ted Brantley and I were fixing the machine, and it was a long transfer machine. And we had some locators and clamps that didn't work very good. And Ted was up there on the back end of it. He was squirting the oleum in there, and I was up the front end working the clamps. And he'd go, he'd make a signal for me to close the clamps, and I'd close them. And I looked up, and opened his hands, and I'd open the clamps. The time I looked up, hey, boy, he's going like this, shaking his hands all around. And I run down there and said, Ted, what the hell does this mean? That means that locator's down through my foot. And it was. It went all the way through his foot.
He had his foot sticking in the way.
And when they had clamped it, why the locator, and they were,
big pin.
Yeah. Clear through his foot.
And after that, then they quit doing that.
No, I'm afraid no.
They didn't.
No, a lot of goofy things happened. Another time I was working with this guy, Bob Woodhams, and we were working on a transfer machine there. It was in rods, I believe.
Yeah.
At any rate, something wasn't going right. And he opened a safety gate and was looking down in it. When he got his shoulder in there, why the bar tripped up, and the screw that was used to trip a limit switch went right down through his shoulder.
Oh, gosh.
Another time in the block floor, this is the worst one. And the 3828 block floor, it was brand new there, we were setting it up. And it was just that was the most ornery machine that they ever built. Everything was hidden. Dowel pins were hidden. Especially on the mill where they broached the bearing cap surface. And we had to tear that damn thing all apart and redo it because cotter keys were hidden. You couldn't fix anything without tearing the whole machine apart.
Oh, great.
So at any rate, it was Marv Gensterbloom and I had that floor. And they had a problem where they drilled and reamed the locating hole, why the reamer broke off in the hole and stayed in the head, and the machine head, and the head was down. or partway down. And so of course it stopped, and those are big 3/4 inch drills per year. So at any rate, why it went and drilled a hole and then shifted over and went on the second pass to ream it. And it was the drill that broke, and it hadn't completed, backed up and gone over for the reamer to come down. That was what it was. And at any rate, Marvin was up there with a big wrench, pipe wrench, and pipe trying to break that drill off.
Okay, anyway, the drill, he was trying
At
to
any
break
rate,
the
he
drill.
was trying to break the drill out to release it and everything. And I said, Marv, you got the electric off? Yep. You pull a whistle cord? Yep. You're all set? Yep. And I said, well, I'll go get you a longer pipe. We got to break that thing off. So I just turned my back, and I heard a snap, a crack, you know. And I turned around, and here was Marvin, and the thing broke off, and it finished its cycle.
Oh,
and
no.
Marvin was sitting, you know, ahead of the block, with his legs, both legs down in there. And it transferred and pulled him right underneath that thing. One leg, he stood up and got one leg out, and the other leg was broken in 3 places. And boy, I can still hear that crack, 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 just like that. And what had happened was that there was no way or no real functional ability to release the pressure, and so when it was relieved and everything, it just finished the cycle, you know.
It just sprung.
Yeah.
Gosh.
At any rate, it was right during the shift change time, and boy, there's a whole crowd of people around there.
I can imagine.
Yep.
Did people get upset about that sort of happenstance?
Oh yeah, it took probably an hour and a half to get him out. They had started to do all kinds of things, take off the air or the hydraulic cylinders at the end, and take apart the transfer bar and all this kind of stuff. And finally, some guy, I forget who it was, he came up and he said, well, why don't you take the transfer dog off? And that was all there was, and then we moved the
slide
block.
it back.
Yep. And I run over to first aid. First thing I did after I knew everything was off was or stopped, you know. Went over to first aid and got the nurse. And she came out there and asked him if he wanted a shot, and he wouldn't take a shot. But his leg was...
Oh, that pretty well mangled, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was screwed up every, you know. It never did heal right, I guess, but screwed up leg.
Did folks eventually get more conscious of that sort of stuff later, so that those kinds of...
Those accidents still happen.
They did when you left?
I would imagine, yep, they were still there, and it wasn't all because of carelessness.
Oh, no. Yeah.
As much as it was poor judgment sometimes. But then on the other thing, in repair areas and repair groups, you really had to see the machinery working before something went wrong, you know.
To understand
so
how
what was the matter with it, you know. You couldn't just stand back on the machine, stop and say, well, I think it's this or that or the other thing, you know. So it was...
Did you ever have to drag the engineer types down there to work with you, or?
Yeah.
Or the manufacturer guy that built the machine?
Yeah, I remember in rocker arms, they sent a new machine. It was a brooch. I forget the engineer, but that was the dumbest machine they ever built. It couldn't do anything. We were trying to rebuild it so it would at least do what it was supposed to do, you know. And it was a great big monster of a machine. And there was, for all it did, there was no, you know, it was poor design and poor built. And it didn't clamp the part right and all this kind of stuff.
Did you guys have some choice words for those kinds of engineers?
Oh, yes. Where in the hell did you buy this? Are you sure you saw it work before you bought it? And all this kind of stuff, you know. And, which I guess they were supposed to do. You know, it was all set up in the plant that built it, and they were supposed to go down there and see it work.
Did they ever drag you out to any of the vendors' plants to look at any of this machinery?
Just a couple of times.
A couple of times.
Not as a general rule, and I never went. No. It wasn't, you know. I wasn't an engineer, I was
No.
a process engineer.
Yeah, I know, but I thought maybe they might have had you do some things, look at some things.
Yeah,
Whether you get your
we
judgment
looked
on
at
it.
some of them, yeah. Not all that hard.
Mhm. Did the work standards guys had a thankless job, sort of. Did you have some, what I'll call, interesting experiences there, other than the bumper filing situation? What kinds of things would people do out in the plant when a work standards or time study guy was arriving?
Well, of course they would slow down, and they would have all kinds of problems. Even if they didn't, they didn't want to be studied, most of them.
Mm-hmm.
And once in a while, you'd have to tell them to slow down. They'd get nervous and just go as fast as they could, And once in a while, you'd have to tell them to slow down. You can't keep that pace up all day long, and nobody else could.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So you guys would recognize that?
Yeah.
If a guy was really...
You're working way too fast.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And that happened more than one would think, I think.
Uh-huh. How about the...
Another time, I worked with Ray Burns quite a bit.
Okay.
And
he was in the Axle plant, was he?
he was in several plants.
Okay.
But walking down the aisle with him, you had to be careful. You never walked on the inside, always the outside. Because he'd talk a mile a minute,
Mhm.
and he'd always steer you into something,
Oh.
get closer to you.
Yeah. Push off the aisle.
More than once I'd run into a gone or something because I was paying attention to what he was saying, and
Goodness.
that
Uh-huh.
finally learned to walk on the outside.
Uh-huh.
Going between plants one day where somebody got him with a 5-gallon pail of water on the roof. I remember
On
that.
purpose?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, on
goodness.
purpose.
Well, did he take it all right, or?
Yeah, he was mad, yeah.
Was
He
he?
went home, changed his clothes, and come back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I never had anybody do any other than, yeah, I did too. It's over in Bondurant and Prime area, in the paint. And standing there taking a study, and boy, all of a sudden this thing went whizzing by my head. Turned around, and this guy just glaring at me, and he isn't even hiding it.
Mhm.
And he's mad. He's mad. And I went over, what the hell did you do? He says, well, I threw this at you, and it was it was a pretty big hunk of stuff.
My goodness.
And I said, well, what if it hit me? He said, well, I was trying. So I went up and talked to this foreman, and the foreman wanted to give him some time off, but I said, no, I think I'll just stay out of here for a couple of days and let him cool off.
Yeah. What was he mad about? Just because you were there?
Just because I was in the area.
Uh-huh.
And he never liked me. I worked Bondurant Prime. I hung on stuff too, and I was, I had worked there, so I knew what it was. And those guys had a racket.
Did the management folks support the work standards guys?
Some of them did, and some of them didn't. Some of them did. I think, for instance, Bud Borkman, he was quite a hard supervisor. I mean, he was not all that easy for time study to get along with. And he and I used to argue and argue and argue. And one day we had a big argument about something. I don't even remember what it was. And this guy came busting in the office. We usually out of earshot, so nobody could hear you. You didn't do it out on the floor and in the open or anything, And this guy come in, and we were shouting. And Bud said, leave us alone, we're busy talking here. And he says, but I want you to remember, he said, time study is always right.
He said it to that guy?
Yep.
Uh-huh.
So then he went out and he said, that's for him. That is between you and me, and that's for him.
Uh-huh.
So he was a supporter, and he believed it. But a lot of the standards he would question, but there was nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
That was his right.
Deals?
Deals? What do you mean deals? I never cut a deal.
No, I don't mean you. But guys out on the floor with deals with standards and those kinds of things? In-house standards that weren't our standards?
Estimated standards were some good and some bad. We were close with estimating, so that most of them were good, but not necessarily all of them.
I mean, where we would say we should get 100, and the guy out there would, the foreman or the general foreman would say, hey, if you get 40, I'm happy with that.
I'm sure they were cut. I pretended I didn't know it, and it was none of my business because their efficiency was their problem, not mine.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course, we got hookered about efficiency. It's got to come up, you know. Say, well, you make the pieces, you'll get the efficiency, and use the right manpower, and you'll get it. The only thing out of my whole experience that disappointed me probably the most of anything was, I think it was 74, 76, one of those years, why we wanted to build 1 million engines.
Right.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, 76.
74?
76.
76, okay. And at that time, in order to build 1 million engines, everybody's working overtime and all this kind of stuff. And so I forget who his manager was.
Bob Moonin was general manufacturing manager.
Yeah.
Belts, I
He
think.
wasn't, huh?
Was it Belts?
It was Belts.
Or was it Cook?
Cook.
Cook, probably, yeah.
Okay.
76, yeah. It would have been Cook.
And, yeah, at any rate, why, he's bound determined he's going to build them. He could sell them. We could build them. And so they saturated the floors with people that they didn't need, they couldn't use, just to get that one more piece, you know.
Just dump, threw people
Just
at it.
Dump, yep. And I was heavy on the block floors at that time. I had all of them. And there they put in conveyor attendants that were useless. I didn't need them, just to help out. And I asked Cook come down there, and he was looking around. And I asked him, why we got all these people in here? What we got to get to pieces. And I said, I don't know if you realize it or not, but by the time this conveyor attendant doesn't know anything about this work, he doesn't know what the hell's going on, somebody said, you take care of this place and take the blocks off and put them back on as you need it. Well, the guy didn't know when he was needed or not. And so something would go wrong where he was needed by the time a foreman and the setup man then did nothing except sit down. And by the time the foreman got around to finding this guy to tell him where to go to take blocks off, the condition was probably cleared, you know. And so he wasn't any good anyway. But those people hung in the routings until the day I left. They were still there.
It's hard to get out once they get in.
Once they got in, you couldn't get them out. As it used to be, the setup man had probably 1.5 more times stuff to look at than he did at that time, and he also was his own conveyor attendant. And he took and put in and took out as he needed, you know, and he was the guy that knew. Because, well, they said, when he's doing this, he's changing drills. Well, generally, it wasn't on, if his machine was down because he was changing drills, there's nothing going through there anyway, so that isn't the place where you needed to take off, you need to put on. But the next section was the guy who was supposed to be putting them on there, you know. And taking them off at the other end, or whatever. But the long transfer lines of that nature never did work very well after that time, because nobody wanted to be responsible for doing it. And I can remember when 500 a shift was good through 28 block floor. And I also remember when we thought if we got 350, we were doing damn good. So it really deteriorated, and I blame it all on the extra people that they put in there that lessened a job for another person, all right. And his thing was, well, these setup men are working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, some of them, and I want to give them some rest. Well, that wasn't the way to give them rest, I think, by adding conveyor attendants. But whatever, why, I guess we built our millionth engine.
Yeah, we did. Well,
And,
at all
he was
costs.
satisfied. But also, speaking of Cook, before he was big boss, why, he was an engineer. And it was the Gano was on the block for her. You know, we were having trouble with homes. And boy, I couldn't get a good finish on them. And couldn't hold sizes. And they were reciprocating homes,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And so I went down there and looking them over, and they were running that kerosene. And so Cook was there. He was the engineer on that. And I don't know if he was a boss and an engineer or not. Probably was. But at any rate, why, he come up there and was bending over my shoulder, and that irritated me. And I asked him to step down, get the hell out of the way so I could do my work. He wouldn't move. He stayed right there. So I was pulling a hone head, and it was stuck down in the cylinder. And so I knew when you pulled them out, well, you got about half a gallon of kerosene. So I pulled it out right this way, and he got drenched.
Oh, I bet he loved
He
it.
says, if I didn't know better, he says, I'd say you did that on purpose. Of course, whoops, pardon me, and all
Yeah,
that
right.
stuff.
Right.
He didn't enjoy that too much. But he moved. He moved down on the floor there. Another time. Well, there was over in Plant 3. I think the jet engine program was still in there at that time.
All right.
At any rate, Darren Uren was our superintendent. And we used to parallel production. If they were 10 hours, so did we.
Mm-hmm.
But then they decided that they were going to cut us down to 8 hours and stagger our shifts.
Okay.
And but at certain times, why, they would run into trouble and ask the guy to stay over, okay, a couple hours.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't like this, of course. And so me and another guy, we went all around the place and told everybody to refuse it. Have an excuse that you got to get home or whatever, but don't work any overtime.
Okay.
And so this kept up for a couple of weeks. And boy, everything was going to hell because nobody would work overtime.
You guys were being ornery.
Yep. And on some jobs, why, certain people were the only, you know, they were the guys that could get it fixed. And
Only
get
ones
it
that
back working
understood it.
again, you know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, Darwin called a meeting. And we were all down around his office, and I was about maybe second in a row in the line around there, you know. He said, told us all about what was going to happen to us if we didn't quit it and all this kind of stuff. Pointed his finger and he says, if I ever find out who that Ueberroth is, I'll fire him. And he's pointing right at me. He didn't know me. He knew who I was,
And
but
he
he
knew the
didn't
name.
associate the name with me, you know.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of kept cool. I downplayed whatever.
Uh-huh. So you didn't get fired?
I didn't get fired. You know.
Did that quit that? Was that the end of
I
all that?
think
Or?
after about a week or two, then they put us back to parallel production.
Yeah.
So it turned out all right. But constituted lockout. You can't have lockouts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So you said you never got on the car assembly plant, huh?
Never got final assembly.
Yeah.
No, I never. I worked
Okay.
up there just maybe 2 or 3 times on time study, and that was it.
All
I
right.
never. No.
Okay.
Fortunately, it never appealed to me. The assembly
Yeah.
part never.
Yeah.
I liked machining and things of that nature better than I did assembly.
What was the toughest part of the time study guy's job?
Toughest part?
Mm-hmm. Hardest part, whatever you want to call it.
I don't know. I suppose that depended on the individual. Sometimes the figuring of it was tough. Sometimes the writing of it was tough.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes laying out the job the right way was tough.
So you guys had to go down and show people how to do the task?
Yes, it was efficient. You know, if you'd see a different way of doing it, that was, I suppose, I considered it all part of the job. Don't ever take what they're doing as utopian way of doing it. You know, there might be a better way to look around for it.
You had to get your time studies approved by the guys out in the plant?
Yeah, that was probably the hardest part.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the bickering and arguing that went on, which was common, and a lot of the superintendents even would just would leave them sitting in the office, you know, for a month, and finally they might sign them, finally they might not. But that time you couldn't route unless all the signatures were there, but then that stopped too, and you could route. It was accepted, you know.
Whether it got signed or not. Whether it got signed or not, it got accepted.
Yeah, most of the time, and then after it was all done, well, then you would have them sign a slip that this is as many people as you want to use, this many as you know. But
was the push on for efficiency in those days?
yes, indeed, it certainly was. Efficiency was the last word.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was, it was terribly bad, and I never really agreed with that approach, because efficiency could be won or lost for a lot of different reasons other than time study, you know. And just plain old machinery down.
Sure.
And lack of manpower a lot of times. Maybe your key men were homesick that day or whatever, but there was a lot of reasons. And I don't think work standards was the prime reason for inefficiency. There's too many other reasons, but that was one thing they could blame it on.
Yeah.
And naturally they did.
Did guys kind of play games with their efficiency between shifts and those kinds of things?
Between shifts and between groups. I remember, and that was particularly bad when the diesel went in. And of course, nothing was very good on that. And I remember even in the budget, why we took hours out of here and added them in here, you know, to give them to the diesel. I never even proved to that, but that was done. I think were you a part of that one?
I was there.
We didn't like it, did we?
Yeah.
But we did it.
Yeah.
But I never could figure out the reason for it, except that it was cost overrun over than the bid or whatever. But whatever, it was, that type of thing was done. And not all that often.
On occasion, yeah.
And there were transfer of hours between groups to even out their efficiency. Some people would have an easy efficiency to get assembly type operations. Generally were more efficient than a machining type operation.
Didn't have so many things to go haywire.
Right. So they would, you know, trade back and forth hours.
Yeah.
And everybody had a bank where they could maintain a certain efficiency anyway. Come inventory time, that's why those hundreds of gallons out there got thrown away, because of their banks. And that's something I never could figure out either.
Did they do anything with on the scrap side? Did that get involved in any place?
These were good parts.
Yeah.
Good parts that were thrown away because nobody recognizes they were being done.
That they were there?
They were there.
Oh, goodness gracious.
The scrap part of it was always a problem. And again, you had tons of reasons for scrap other than somebody just being careless. You know?
Sure. Yeah. Drill break off.
It generally wasn't carelessness that caused the scrap. It was some other thing, you know.
Yeah.
Although people did, I remember seeing tons of heads come down through there with no bolt holes on them whatsoever. And I don't know, you know. So they put in were you around there when they put in that laser outfit to check the holes in the head? Big deal, you know. I don't know how much money they spent on the damn thing. But here it was supposed to check all the depth and size and see if it had threads and all this kind of stuff on the head. Get rid of 3 or 4 inspectors. Yep, sure did. The only thing, couldn't tell if there was water in the bottom of the hole or not. It would say it's not deep enough. And, oh my.
It was kicking them out?
Yep.
Yeah.
They never did get that thing working. As first, I think probably the first laser type machine that they had for inspection. And I don't know how much it cost, but they junked it.
Yeah. Yep.
And they put in new air blow-offs and all this kind of stuff. Air blow-offs that they weren't supposed to have because of the noise. You know,
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, right. The whistles.
Couldn't have all the noise, and
yeah.
so you couldn't blow them off like you wanted to. And there's water in there, and that machine that said, "Hole isn't drilled all the way deep enough." You know. At first, the guy would believe it and go down, and reset his tools, and they were going into the average
running into the water chamber.
The water chamber, all kinds of bad stuff. And they knew better.
Yeah.
They knew better, but a lot of the machines said so. The guys didn't like it either.
Yeah.
And the inspection was when they first hired in, inspection was a little group. They didn't hardly have any inspectors. You were responsible for your own stuff as a machine operator.
Yeah.
And the inspectors were almost unheard of. They only had maybe 2 or 3 along the whole damn assembly line. And there was just a floor inspector in most of the machine. There was no, you know. And then some guys got a hold of that damn thing, and boy, then it became a big department. Quality control, big department. And
then nobody was inspecting.
no, that is one of the things about inspection, is that inspectors generally don't look for what is there. They look for what isn't there. If something isn't there, it triggers something in their mind that says that isn't there or whatever. They might not know exactly what it is right now, right at this, you know, but that's why they look at it. But they'll sit there all day long looking and they'll find things, you know. But something like a hole not tapped or something, they go right on by that because they're not, you know, but they can tell a wrong part, or they can tell if the hole isn't there or whatever. But if it's the right size or if it isn't tapped,
yeah, you can't inspect in quality.
No.
Really can't.
And I always felt that was one of the things that cost them way too much money, and for what the payback they got off of those inspections.
But the early days, the machine operator was responsible.
You're right. When you turned in your parts, they were good parts, and they by God better be good parts. Yeah.
Okay.
Now you did your own setup and changed your own tools and all that kind of stuff too. Then they come around with job setters, you know. We'll do it for you. But, so there's a lot of difference. I mean, of course, things weren't, the machinery wasn't near as complicated, and it was generally single-purpose machinery. Did one thing, and that was all there was to it, and it wasn't very complicated. So I suppose that was the way to do it, you know. As machinery became more complicated, then it either took maybe a little bit of intelligence to keep it running. I suppose that was the purpose of adding the people. But I think they should get away from that too. In fact, I made a presentation once. And now this was a long time ago. And I really forget who was in, those production people were in a presentation that I was giving. And my closing statement was, fellas, if we don't do better, we better start learning Japanese.
Interesting.
And
you might have been a
looked
prophet.
at me.
You might have been a prophet there.
And a lot of the things weren't because we couldn't do it. Quality isn't because we can't do it.
No.
It's because somewhere along the line, that particular worker has either lost his sense of responsibility or even never had it in the first place.
That's right.
Because I know we can do things as well as anybody else.
You bet. Because we taught them all.
Yeah. The thing that we did bad with both Germany and Japan was rebuild their equipment after the war, so they had better equipment than we did, and we never did overcome that. And once they got the knack of doing this type thing, then they became experts at it, along with their lower labor costs, of course. But that was one of the wrong things we did. That's why most of our stuff started going over there, was not necessarily the the betterness of their product, and it sure wasn't that, because they built junk for a good
Oh,
many
yeah,
years.
right.
you
After
know.
the war, things were not the
But
greatest.
it was cheaper because of their labor costs, and they had better equipment,
Yeah.
brand new machinery,
Yeah.
brand new factories.
Yeah. Well, what do you think, Win? Have we covered it reasonably well?
That takes
I
me
mean,
up
it's a-
to time I retire.
It's a quick synopsis, kind of. So, I think that we're
Well,
pretty good.
I
So,
think all in all, I still drive Oldsmobile cars, although I'm not 1,000% satisfied with them, but
Yeah,
as
yeah.
out of loyalty,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But
A lot of good times there.
they give me a good place to work and allowed me to raise my family and all that. So
See, did you tell me when you retired? Did we get that on here? I can't remember.
I
when we did.
retired in April or May of 80 or 81 or 82, one of them.
Okay.
It was in that
All right.
time, but
Yeah.
I forgot the exact year.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, I guess I'll just shut that baby off.